And we're back. Welcome to part 3 of our Dexter coverage. I'm Chris, I'm here with Ian, and we will be going through rewrites for Dexter that would potentially fix the show. And so the way we're going to do it, or I guess I should rephrase, the way that we have done it is we have rewritten or gone through all 8 seasons of the main show and then New Blood. We have come up with concepts or somewhat fleshed out ideas that we would use if we were going to rewrite the show and pitch it to a studio and basically, I guess, recontextualize the canon within Dexter, if that makes sense. So the way that I think you and I are going to do it is I will read what I did with my season 1, and then you will read what you are going to do with your season 1, and then we'll keep alternating back and forth until we get all the way to the end. That work for you?
Yeah, that sounds good, man.
Okay. So I think season 1 is a really solid start to the show, but it really does have its share of issues. As far as praise, I really like the flashbacks we get pertaining to Dexter's childhood and his upbringing. I'm going to be that guy, but I really wished we got more of that past the first 2 seasons. And I really wish that went alongside him getting messages from Harry in the form of his dark passenger as opposed to being replaced by that. The plot this season, I think, is really strong. It flows pretty well. There's a couple hiccups here and there, but especially compared to some of the later seasons. I mean, hell, you and I talked about season 8 and season 9, or well, New Blood. I keep doing that for quite a while. It was almost, I think, 3-4 hours. But there's plenty of issues with the later seasons as we get into. Now, as far as criticism, I feel as though the season relies a bit too much on the character-focused payoffs, and unfortunately, I don't think the work is there to kind of front-load those payoffs and make them hit as hard as you need them to. So I think in order to have these events hit harder, we need to spend a little bit more time with the characters on their own. We need to learn a little bit more about their histories, and we need to give them some time to actually develop. They need to be more than simple chess pieces for Dexter to manipulate as he sees fit. So that said, I think the season might have benefited from being longer, but I'm going to try and keep these rewrites under the confines of I will stick with I think it's 12 episodes or 10 episodes that each season does. I think it's 12 with New Blood being 10. So moving into the fixes, I'm going to start by modifying the show's timeline just a little bit. It wouldn't be explicit, but it would be heavily implied from the first 2 episodes that Dokes and LaGuerta were a couple, and they have recently broken up, which would add a bit to their interactions with Dexter throughout the season, specifically LaGuerta flirting with Dexter, Dokes' overall demeanor, how he treats Dexter, and then later becomes suspicious of him, and, there's a lot that you can potentially go into with that, I think. At the same time, Batista will have cheated on his wife just before the start of the series, and we can clearly see the struggles of his marriage, even though his wife doesn't necessarily know at the beginning that he has cheated on her. And it won't be until Dokes' internal affairs investigation, in which Batista lies to protect him and then backpedals on that he will then tell his wife the truth about his affair. Both of these changes will be accounted for within the first few episodes, added in through some different scenes across the first probably the first 3, really. Just giving us a little bit more time again with those characters, making sure that we plant some seeds for some stuff that I want to do later on in the rewrite. As for Dokes, I want him and Dexter to have a passing relationship like we saw in that flashback in season 7. But overall, I want Dexter to kind of be somewhat friendly with him, and then we can kind of play into Dokes becoming suspicious of him and their relationship souring to set up the following season. As far as the flashbacks we get of Dexter and Deb's childhood, I think they worked pretty effectively. They're short, they're simple, they're to the point. There's a bit more that I'd like in the present day through flashbacks, that being Laura Moser and Harry kind of indirectly setting up the events that led to Laura's death and Dexter seeing it. Because I feel like those are kind of big moments that we don't really get to see. We just get to hear secondhand accounts of, Harry did, offhandedly, we're going to mention that Harry did set up the circumstances that led to her death. And we're not really going to see exactly why he wasn't there in order to protect her at the shipping yard when he really needed to be. Um, so I guess I would like to be able to use the flashbacks to better set that up and continue to build up Dexter and Deb as characters, and even build off of Harry, since, as we talked about, one of the things that they consistently do in the later seasons is they consistently shit on him and make him a terrible person at every opportunity they can. So I'd also like for the death of Joe Driscoll to make Dexter poke into his mother's death some more than it does in the show, because he basically finds that out and is kind of like, well, whatever. I figure he can find out the details surrounding his mother's death from Camilla Fig, who's the woman that I believe she's in the police precinct. I believe she's the archive lady there that keeps track of all the the prison, no, not prison, the police station records. I don't know why I'm struggling right now.
It's okay.
Um, Ideally, I'd use this to set up the relationship between Dexter and Brian, since there's not a ton in terms of context clues to hint at their their relation to one another. I will admit I toyed with the idea of not having them be related at all, but I think it opens up some interesting story avenues as it is, and it has some moral questions that you can raise for Harry in season 2, so I've decided to keep it as is. And that is what I've got for season 1. Other than what I've listed, everything stays the same. Brian is still the ice truck killer. He is still the person that they are tracking down. Him and Deb are still a thing. Pretty much all of the dynamics are the same except for the changes that I read. So, with that, it's up to you now.
Okay. So, um, I'd sorry. Um, I'd agree with you about the whole exploring each character, obviously, giving depth to some of these characters because like you said, it does seem like they're pawns that Dexter is using rather than actual people. And obviously a lot of the characters are great, but they do feel wasted by the end of the show, like Batista, like you said. I didn't really go into details about that, but I'd say I'd agree that I would keep the ice truck killer stuff, keep Brian, but my big my big uh pitch for season 1 and season 2, but I'll just say season 1 for now. Um I don't think killing Brian at the end of season 1, I kind of for my idea of this show, I'd like to I'd like to continue his appearance until season 2. I'd like to make Brian a pretty apparent character, but obviously with the whole him being the ice truck killer and him having that, you know, that close connection with Deb, I'd sort of have to introduce a character that Brian um sort of puts the whole ice truck killer um he like this guy's let's say this guy is being accused of the ice truck killing stuff, and so he's the huge suspect, and Brian is sort of um left in the shadows. He's not really being accused anymore, and so by the end of the show, even though Dexter knows his brother is his brother's evil, he wonders if he should if he he should go into the temptation of killing his brother, or if he should find out why his brother is the way he is. And I sort of would explore with his connection, which you're right, he doesn't necessarily have that strong of a connection with his brother, which I felt like he should have. I felt like I feel like the most interesting idea is exploring how both of them experiencing that tragic event turn them to kind of fucked up individuals in some ways, like how obviously Brian is a serial killer, and so is Dexter, but obviously Dexter has that sort of faded morality to his whole killings. But with Brian, I'd sort of introduce how Dexter is sort of seeing the duality of himself, duality of this traumatic event, how it changes people, but also like obviously he starts to see the importance of his own family, which obviously a lot of these themes kind of show up throughout the show, like in season
Mm-hmm.
3 and season 4. But I don't know. I felt like there's a lot of possibility with Brian's character that they didn't really go into in the show very much. But for season 1, I'd say I'd keep most of it the same. I'd keep Brian's appearance is there. I'd keep him being the ice truck killer. I'd keep him and Deb's relationship. I would obviously have to add certain plot points to make it so, um, Brian wouldn't be caught as the ice truck killer and, continue it into season two. But um, I don't know. I'd sort of add what you said about Batista. Have those certain events happen in these characters' lives that we're building to, and we're sort of seeing the faded morality within themselves too.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing the good in the bad, and then the bad and the good. I felt like that's the most interesting part of the show, and when they rarely get into it, it is pretty interesting. But yeah, that's my sort of loose pitch for season one. But
Okay. Um, I do think it's kind of cool. We went two completely different directions, like right out of the gate. So
yeah.
awesome. So season two, I found season two to be quite the mixed bag. Like, you know what? Hell, at this point, just gonna throw it out there. If you're listening to this and you haven't seen our coverage of Dexter seasons 1 through 8 and New Blood, I will have the links for both videos in the description. They're a bit lengthy, but if you've seen the show, I highly recommend you watch. Anyways, back on topic now.
Mhm.
Conceptually, I like quite a bit about this season. Specifically, I like everything with Dexter and Dokes. I don't know why I said Doke. Except for the latter's death. Dokes is killed off incredibly quickly, and we speed run what could have been one of the show's best payoffs. And these payoffs are handled relatively well for it being this early on, but again, it's still super early. And I think it's a terrible idea to cash in on it really this quick. I found Lila incredibly annoying, but I can appreciate what she does for Dexter in the end by killing Dokes to protect him and the fact that she accepted him for who he is. Jumping into the changes that I would make for this season, having said all that, I'd start by removing Lila and scrapping Dokes' death. Or at least getting rid of them for now. You'll see what I'm getting at. Instead, I'd like to blend the story that remains of season 2 with some elements of season 8. Yes, I just said that. Hear me out. So, I would like to make Evelyn Vogel a character at the start of season 2. Admittedly, I hated the character in season 8 and thought it would. Ugh, I'm sorry. Admittedly, I did not like Evelyn as a character. I do think it's extremely late in the show to include her, but I do think putting her at the beginning of the show, you have a couple different opportunities to use her character for what they were, I guess, potentially going for in season 8. You can use her to fill in some of the blanks about Dexter's past that the audience might have. You can fill in some of the moral questions that Dexter would have about Brian being abandoned by Harry, and you can raise some even, I guess, general questions that Dexter would have about the morality of his, I guess, adoptive father, really, making the code for him to kill people, I guess, quote unquote, morally. So I would kind of want to use that for that purpose. But the other thing that I'm thinking of actually now is she can also be a bit of a voice of reason that can help Dexter kind of understand himself as a whole and sort of counteract the Dark Passenger, since she would really be the only character who is still alive at this point that would know that Dexter is a serial killer. Ideally, I would like to use her to connect Dexter's past and present in a few ways. I'm thinking through Vogel, we can learn that she and Harry created the code together once it became apparent that Dexter was likely going to become a serial killer. We can also learn that Harry made the decision to abandon Brian because he thought the boy had seen too much and would need psychiatric help that Harry wouldn't have been able to offer him. Dexter can then ask if Harry really would have abandoned him if he was damaged as well, as opposed to, what we obviously what we have seen happen to Dexter. He was taken in, he was cared for, and then obviously he was given the code. I think Vogel would kind of see this as a way to, I guess, sort of defend Harry's honor. Like, this is the reason that he made the decision. It was because he felt like he owed you. It was because he felt like your mother's death was on his hands. It was a mix of everything, but at the same time, he knew that Brian was a bit too far gone. Um, Harry's. I'm sorry. Vogel, again, I think Vogel attempting to kind of defend that decision kind of reiterates to Dexter what is most important about not only the code but the acceptance of who and what Brian was. And then I think Vogel can really say that there's no way to know whether or not Brian would have turned out fine, whether he had been abandoned to the mental health system and just kind of let loose like he was, or if things would have been better for him if Harry did take him in and did try to teach him the code too. Um, I think Dexter can walk away from his time with Vogel throughout the season, uh, kind of settling a decent amount of discomfort that he might have about his past. Maybe he has some pity for his brother, and I think he would have a bit of a disgust for the way that Harry and Vogel both went about things. In a sense, they were both sort of pawns that were expendable. As for the main antagonist, I would use Oliver Saxon, the brain surgeon, but I'm cutting the connection between Saxon and Vogel because I don't think it's, first off, not going to use the relation to one of the main characters twist twice in terms of a killer, but at the same time, I also don't think that her son being the killer of the season really did anything to explore different story avenues at all. So, just going to cut that. The
Yeah.
season would basically begin the same as the aired show. Dexter's just killed Brian. He's trying to process everything associated with that. And at the same time, some of the Bay Harbor Butcher victims begin washing up on shore. With Doak spending his free time tailing him, Dexter feels trapped and can't kill. And back at home, Rita confronts Dexter about setting up Paul and indirectly causing his death. And this leads him, or I'm sorry, yeah, this leads to the fake reveal that Dexter is supposedly a heroin addict, and so he takes off to get help. Dexter simultaneously looks into his father's old cases through Camilla Figg, the woman that I mentioned earlier, who was the police station uh, record filer, however the hell you want to phrase it. At this point, Dexter decides to go to Vogel, hoping to use her as a cover to throw Dokes off by using Vogel as a sort of unofficial therapist slash psychologist, and having her kind of dive deep into what makes him tick, why is he the way that he is, stuff like that. Um, at the same time, Frank Lundy would be brought in to investigate the Bay Harbor Butcher victims and then assists with the hunt for the brain surgeon. And the season would end with Saxon being outed as the brain surgeon, Saxon killing Vogel for her what he perceives as her ruining his life through her, I guess you could say, experimental treatment, which, in a sense, I guess you could say would be somewhat similar to Dexter, but to what extent, I guess, as far as this rewrite's concerned, I'm not entirely sure. Um, yeah, so the season would end with Saxon being killed by Dexter, and Dexter would then go to Narcotics Anonymous. As far as the side plots, I will still have LaGuerta be replaced by Esme Pascal by Captain Matthews at the end of, I believe, season one. So LaGuerta will be doing what she can to get rid of her, and Dokes will have his little obsession with Dexter. And basically, the way that that will play out is how it plays out in the show, save for him getting arrested. He will get suspended instead of being arrested or killed, Dokes. So there's that. Dexter will stage a fight with him like he did in the show, where I believe he headbutts him and then gets him suspended that way. Deb becomes romantically involved with Lundy, and then he takes off, so their relationship dissolves. And then Batista gets his divorce finalized, and we can kind of see the impacts that that's had on his relationships with the different officers in the precinct. But at the same time, we can also see the impact that's had on his relationship with his daughter.
I like that. That's good. I'll be right back. I gotta do something real quick. I'll be right back, like quickly.
Okay, I guess I'll go with season three then.
Okay.
So as far as season three is my personal favorite of the bunch, at least in terms of what aired. I really like the dynamic change, or the not the change, the dynamic between Dexter and Miguel Prado. I really like the challenge of Dexter taking on an accomplice and sort of seeing that relationship that he has with Rita develop and grow at the same time that the person that he took in as an apprentice is becoming someone that he recognizes less and less. He's kind of realizing that maybe taking Miguel in and taking him on was a mistake. So I think what I would like to do is take some of the plot lines that I've cut from season two and put them here. Specifically, I'm thinking the Lila plot line. And no, I'm not using every single thing from season two, but you'll see where I'm going. So in my rewrite for season three, Dexter will be attending Narcotics Anonymous meetings more regularly, given that Vogel has passed, and so he can't go to her to kind of account for what he's been doing to avoid Dokes, and also what he's been doing to try and make things right with Rita. Much like the show did, Lila will become his sponsor, and the two will travel together. And Lila will help Dexter, well, I guess, set up and then kill Santos Jimenez, one of the men who killed Dexter's mother. And their relationship drives a wedge between Dexter and Rita before it becomes romantic and then implodes. In line with the show, Dexter repeatedly makes decisions in favor of Rita, Astor, and Cody, which upsets Lila greatly and prompts her to try repeatedly to hurt or kill the people close to Dexter in order to try and control him and get his attention. By the end of the season, Dexter will kill Lila and he will resume his relationship with Rita, but he does admit to himself that Lila helped him better understand his dark side and how to control it. In the way of side plots, Batista would have about the same going on. Maybe a few extra scenes of what's going on with him, his ex wife, and his daughter. But given that he's down a bit and he has no custody of his daughter, only visitation and such, I would still probably keep the idea that he hooks up with Lila when the opportunity presents and believes that it can help him, quote unquote, get back on the saddle. Lila then frames him for date rape, and basically that plays out the same way that it does in the aired show. He gets arrested, he gets charged, and after Lila passes, that charge ends up getting dropped. It's kind of is what it is. LaGuardia would be pressured by Captain Matthews to find the Bay Harbor Butcher, which would lead to her hiring Joey Quinn and having Dokes run points on the operation. Dokes poking his head around in Dexter's business continues, and he leads to and this leads to several substantial plot developments. Dokes works with Quinn to examine the bodies of the Bay Harbor Butcher, finding puncture marks on their necks and inferring from this that the killer is using some sort of drug to incapacitate the victims. Dokes believes Dexter is the butcher and decides to present his findings to LaGuardia with Quinn present. He explains the puncture marks, Dexter's erratic behavior, his attendance at Narcotics Anonymous, and his meetings with Vogel, as well as Lundy's statements about the profile of the Bay Harbor Butcher, with the hopes of LaGuardia greenlighting an investigation into Dexter, but she doesn't go for it. Dokes argues with her. Let me try that again. Dokes argues with her, but LaGuardia reminds Dokes that he has no evidence of Dexter's guilt, suggesting that even if it was Dexter and they arrested him, he would still walk. After exiting LaGuardia's office, Dokes tries to talk Quinn into helping him look for evidence, but Quinn refuses. Growing frustrated, Dokes takes matters into his own hands and then breaks into Dexter's apartment, and Dexter is able to turn the situation around by framing Dokes as the Bay Harbor Butcher, specifically framing him for the murder of Santos Jimenez and having him arrested. The season ends with Dokes being incarcerated while Dexter is rebuilding his life with Rita. Deb, as part of her little side plot for the season, will learn the truth about Rudy/Brian from Dexter, and will learn that Harry abandoned him as a child, leading to Deb starting her own search into what her father did while he was still alive. During her search, she learns from Matthews that Harry committed suicide, so basically just going to flip that whole thing. Instead of Dexter finding that out and telling her, I'm going to have her figure that out and tell Dex. Through Deb's words and Vogel's old tapes, Dexter learns more about Harry. Harry and his suicide. I'm sorry, I just said that. She will be bugged repeatedly by the lady from Internal Affairs to help investigate Quinn, but Deb is going to refuse to do it. She will clash with Dexter about his issues with Rita and his, somewhat blossoming relationship with Lila, I guess you can say. And after everything this season, Deb is still determined now more than ever to get her detective shield. And that is season 3.
All right, I'm back. I've been back for a little bit, so it's all good.
All right.
Do you want me to read mine, like my
Yes.
season 2
You can
and
go
season
ahead.
3?
I was going to say, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So like I said, Brian is going to be a continued presence throughout the first and second season. So, Brian frames someone for the ice truck murders. And it's more or less I wanted to explore in the second season Brian putting himself in Dexter's life and Rita and the people around him trying like somewhat like embracing him, seeing him as like Uncle Brian or whatever, seeing, and Dexter just doesn't like how Brian is, impeding onto his family, but he more or less is trying to keep everything at balance while obviously, still building on to the lies that obviously lead him to his demise at the end of the show. But you start to see Dexter contemplating whether or not he should kill his brother because he sees how much good his brother's bringing, but like with his family and bringing them together. But at the same time, he obviously doesn't appreciate him obviously being a serial murderer, which obviously kind of goes against everything that Dexter is doing. But at the same time, if he finds out certain things about Harry, perhaps he could see this morality in a different way. But what I was going to go into in the second season is introduce Lila. She's not a character that I really wanted to introduce, but if I have to, I'd have her as a character that Dexter obviously like in the original show he's attracted to her and he succumbs to her and all this. But I kind of feel like it'd be interesting to keep her as somewhat of a secret, and Rita doesn't really find out because Lila is eventually killed by Brian, and Brian he now has this control over Dexter where obviously he's like I do these favors for you, but then obviously Dexter's like, okay, well, you just killed a girl, obviously she's fucking crazy, but she she didn't des obviously, well, he kills her in the original show, so I guess it's not a huge difference, but um that is what causes Dexter to, throughout the season, this will build up to Dexter killing um Brian. And he does it in a way where Dokes is able to find Brian's, whole stash in his house of the bodies and everything. And then they eventually let the guy who was falsely accused of the murders, they let him go. And then Dexter starts to get questioned by Dokes about the connections between Brian, how like, why were they so recently getting close, and Dokes just continues to home on to these ideas of Dexter being connected to not only the ice truck murders, but obviously something even more sinister or something more just out there. Like he just has this, obviously he's had this whole feeling throughout the whole show of Dexter being something more. But then I also said in my rewrite, I don't want to kill off Doak so early, and I agree with what you were saying that killing off Doak so early in the show is one of the show's biggest weaknesses because it's like Doak's being this force of Dexter constantly has to go back and forth and play this game of cat and mouse with him. Like it's probably some of the most entertaining parts of the whole show, even in like the season two where it's of the original, first couple seasons. It's season two is definitely one of the weakest ones. But um, I will say, uh, the end of the show, I kind of wanted to leave it where Dexter's like, he kills his brother, and this huge thing is got off his back, but then he still sees Dokes as a threat. Yeah, he doesn't want to hurt him, but he knows that if he gets pushed to a certain limit, he's gonna have to. Um, Now, this I talked about this a little bit before, but this is obviously just like a loose um pitch. So this isn't every single thing I wanted to introduce. There's like obviously B plots with Deb that I'd like to introduce, and with Batista and all them, but and like Huerta and stuff like that. But obviously the biggest change here is not killing Dokes and making Lila less of an important character. But and then in season three, I'd like to keep some of season three pretty much the same. I feel like it's a pretty strong season for the most part. There's some characters that I don't love, but there are some characters that I'd like to introduce, and obviously I'd like to talk about how obviously Dokes, he's still there, so there's no effect of his death that's impacting all these people. Um, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't really have a lot about this season written down,
No, no,
but
that's okay.
yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I'd continue his whole relationship with what's his name? Oh, what's the guy's name? Shit, Miguel Prado.
Uh,
Is that the guy? that the guy that he becomes friends with in the third
Yes.
season?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I'd really like to continue that. I'd there's certain characters I'd like to introduce, and I'd like to sort of go into Dexter, sort of starting to realize why he likes his family, comparing obviously the his blood family, at the end of season two, comparing his blood family with being Brian, and then obviously I'm seeing his relationship with Deb and seeing his relationship with Rita and Astor and Cody and all of them. I'd like the third season to be not only obviously him gaining more relationships and having them sort of crumble, or because of how his life works, they just things can't be torn together. But I'd also obviously like to have Dokes be more of an impending force, and then have that continue into season four. But yeah, that's pretty much it for my season three. Not much, but
Okay. Um, so as far as I'm concerned with season four, I'm basically playing catch up because I've obviously changed what season two was. Obviously, season three became, well, what season two was sort of going to be. But so season four in my rewrite will be what season three was. So we're basically doing Miguel Prado and the Skinner. They're still the main antagonists. I'm still doing the relationship between Miguel and Dexter. I'm still having Dexter and Rita getting married. That's still going to be the, I guess you could say, primary plot. And for the people that care, yes, Dev would still be Dexter's best man at the wedding. As far as the side plots, a lot of that's going to remain largely the same because I have better foresight, I guess, than the writers did. I know where I want some of these side plots to go.
yeah.
So Angel will make Sergeant. He will meet Barbara Gianna. They will eventually form a romantic relationship, and they will be together by the end of the season. Them making amends, that's not going to be for nothing. I have a plan for that. Deb is removed from the Oscar Prado murder case by Batista and instead works on the Skinner case. She hooks up with Anton Briggs, and she finally receives her detective shield. Rita is pregnant. She and Dexter have to kind of navigate that entire plot line as it was, I guess, in the aired show. That's probably the best way to put it. And then, on a different note, LaGuerta will be working tirelessly to exonerate Dokes, but will eventually be told by Captain Matthews that she needs to drop it because Dokes is the Bay Harbor Butcher and the case is closed in his book. Borrowing from the later seasons, Masuka will learn that he has a daughter, and they will gradually form a bond of their own, swap stories about their past, and start the slow process of Masuka becoming, well, more mature. One other noteworthy thing I think would be Dexter still having to mercy kill Camilla Fig after she gets terminal cancer. Dexter will lament that his only connection to his past, or well, one of the only connections to his past, is now gone.
Well,
I wrapped up, so it's all you.
oh, okay. I thought you were going to continue to go. Is this for season four?
Yeah.
Okay. So I love season four of the original show. I thought it was pretty great. But if I had to say anything, if I had to introduce anything into that show, I feel like Dokes. Having the presence of Dokes and Trinity all together, I felt like that'd be pretty interesting. And introducing, and then obviously we're going into season three with these concepts of family, concepts of Dexter building up this lie upon his family. Obviously, he's building this fortress of lies, you could say, where it's not really lying. It's more or less he's living two different lives, and he's trying to protect each one, his private life and then his family life. And I feel like season four did a great job combining that. Well, also, there are some issues with it. It's not perfect, but I feel like the introduction of Dokes, having Dokes sort of go into more unfavorable positions. Maybe Dokes following Dexter when he's investigating Trinity. I really just I think Trinity's as much as maybe I want to move him to a later season or an earlier season, I feel like in contention with the themes that I'm building in my version of Dexter, where it's about family, about trauma, about all these different things. I feel like introducing Trinity at this moment would be kind of perfect. The only part that I'm kind of contemplating on changing for season four is changing if I want Rita to die, because I feel like um Rita's death is such an impactful moment in the original season four, and I feel like this is the season where Dexter does finally somewhat realize how important is, like, having a strong family bond is. And obviously Dexter still isn't like perfect with his emotions and stuff, but he's able to at least learn at the end of this at that season. But I feel like his death, the death of Rita really could help him sort of explore certain areas of his life that he might that might actually impact his character, that might actually impact like his thoughts and his feelings. So I'm gonna keep Rita's death, and I'm gonna also kill off Dokes. I'm gonna kill him off. I'm not entirely sure how I'm gonna kill him off, but I feel like the death of Dokes, maybe perhaps it's by Dexter's hand again. Like it, not like the whole Lila thing where she kills Dokes or whatever, but more or less, Dokes is killed, and so is Rita, and so we're sort of seeing this huge amount of grief go on to Dexter, and then that's what's going to go into my season five. But yeah, again, sorry, I don't have a lot of details here, but those are my big thoughts for what I would keep, what I would stay the same for season four. But yeah, there's my thing.
Okay. Um, in season 5, I am, again, kind of trying to play catch up, so I will be doing season 4 of what the original show was. I do have a couple issues with season 4. You and I, again, we talked about it at great length. Um, there's a couple of those fixes that I proposed when we were talking about it that I'm going to try and implement as best as I can here, so keep that in mind. That said, I think chief amongst the issues that I have with this season is the character work in the first 3 seasons are very flimsy and weak. A lot of it isn't very great. We don't get a ton in terms of setting up much with Dexter and Rita aside from the very direct problem that they have. So, what happened with Paul kind of gets sideswept by the fact that Dexter then claims to be a drug addict. Um, the issue of them getting married and having the kid kind of quickly resolves itself, and they eventually kind of figure that out and then just keep moving. So I I tried to come up with different ways that I could maybe fix that. I didn't have a ton in terms of Dexter and Rita, but I did try and come up with different things that I could do for the different characters. And so I mean, we've kind of gone over some of that stuff at this point, but we'll keep moving. As far as the side plots, I figure I'll start there. Batista will still be with Barbara Gianna. I'm not immediately going to dump that so that he's shacking up with LaGuerta. That's a huge jump, but we will get there. As such, season 5 will kind of show us the rise and fall of that relationship. So Batista's throwaway line that he and Barbara wanted different things, I now have an opportunity to explain what that different thing that they wanted was. So my assumption would be that Barbara getting hurt in the line of duty at the end of the last season is something that he is going to take extremely personally. And by that, I mean like that is something that is going to, I guess, kind of keep him up at night. You know, he's still thinking, is this a safe job for my girlfriend to be doing? Is this a job that I want to continue to work in the future? And so I think it would almost become the sort of core issue between the two of them would be that Batista would kind of be controlling in a sense. He would kind of want them both to maybe get out of this line of work. And I don't think Barbara would be thrilled by that idea, so I can see that eventually causing a rift between them, and then by the end of the season, I think they would break up. And then Batista, because of that, would move in with his sister, because I would assume by this point, being that it would be probably a year jump between seasons or maybe a couple months, maybe the two of them have moved in together, and then their breakup kind of means that Angel's got to figure out where to go, and his sister's as good a place as any. Plus, it's a decent way to set up potential character moments for later on. So there's that. LaGuerta struggles to accept that Dokes is/was the Bay Harbor Butcher, which is something that Captain Matthews tries to drill into her head by bringing her to a courthouse where Dokes is trying to overturn his conviction, but it doesn't work. Still not convinced, LaGuerta pleads with Matthews to reopen the case, but Matthews insists to LaGuerta that Dokes is the butcher, stating that it's better for his career and hers if the case is closed, and a court of law has come to that same conclusion twice now. LaGuerta talks with Dokes one-on-one shortly afterwards, and he is adamant that he is innocent and maintains that he was framed, now asking LaGuerta to help him prove it. She insists that as of now her hands are tied and apologizes before she takes off. Between the apparent truth about Dokes being, I guess, like I said, drilled into her mind, and Batista breaking up with Barbara, LaGuerta and Batista slowly find comfort in one another, and I would imagine they would sleep together by the end of the season. That aside, Deb deals with the same problems she does in the rewrite, or she does in the main show. So she would be dating Anton, things get rough for them for certain, well, because of certain decisions that the two of them make on their own. Lundy returns to hunt down Trinity. Deb and her sleep together. I can't talk. Deb and Lundy sleep together. Lundy gets killed. Deb is shot, and she explains to Anton that she cheated on him. They break up. Deb laments to Dexter that she's basically been broken by everything that's happened, and she really struggles to move on, channeling all of her efforts into finding Trinity since she believes he is Lundy's killer. Quinn's story is one I struggled with because I wanted to give him something else to do, because I really didn't like the Christine Hill story that they gave him in season 4. I think it's easily one of the weakest parts of that season as a whole. So I think perhaps the best story route to go with is have him and Hill date, but to have her purpose be solely to exploit him for insider info on police cases. So she is not at all related to Trinity, nor does she kill herself. They date, she exploits him, he figures that out, he leaves her. That's it. This also means her motivation to kill Lundy is gone, so Trinity will actually have killed Lundy. Masuka will get some time to connect with his daughter, and I think probably the easiest way to do this, which I think I alluded to when we did the first 2 videos on Dexter as a whole, was the easiest thing to do is to have the teenage girl, or early 20s, whatever, have her babysit Dexter and Rita's kid. Well, kids, I guess. Astor and Cody exist too. At the same time, he starts vetting people to work as interns at Miami Metro and struggles to find people who aren't there for, well, their own purposes. So probably not exactly the same, but the 2 interns that he does hire later on in the show, I would probably repurpose them and use them here, but I would change what they do slightly, because I don't really like the idea that someone just lifted evidence from the evidence locker and then sold it, but I digress. Eventually, I think he would ask his daughter to quit her job as a waitress and come work for him. She talks with Dexter and Rita about not babysitting anymore so that she can work at Miami Metro, and then Dexter and Rita basically agree and say that they will find a new babysitter. As for the main plot, Dexter is still stuck between his 2 lives after Harrison's birth. I found a lot of what they did with Arthur Mitchell and trying to kind of, I guess, show the contrast between the sort of organization that Arthur has versus the chaos that Dexter now finds himself in is kind of interesting. I really do think there's a lot to potentially, well, not even potentially, there's a lot that the show does with that I really do like. So basically, I would keep that the same. After several incidents, Dexter finally kills Arthur, but comes home to find that Arthur has already killed Rita as a way of getting back at Dexter, so I'm keeping Rita's death as it is. In terms of issues that I have with Rita's death, the biggest one, which I've raised to you probably 5 times now, is the time frame, because based on what they show us, I'm not sure Arthur has enough time to justifiably kill Rita. So I think the easiest thing to do is throughout the finale have timestamps of when each scene takes place. That gives us a definitive time frame we can work with. And actually, as a writer for season 6 now, I guess in the rewrite, that also gives you the opportunity to play with different people's stories and versions of events, so that you can still have Joey investigate Dexter in the next season if you really want. So I guess given that timing is kind of a huge component in some of Dexter's kills, this twist really kind of needs time to work in its favor. So again, I don't think the timestamps are all that big of a deal. And the other thing, I'm not exactly sure why Harrison would still be with Rita instead of going with Aster and Cody to their grandparents, especially considering Dexter and Rita are leaving for their honeymoon, so I don't know why you would bring your infant child with you, but whatever. I'm sidestepping that completely. I don't want Harrison to go with them, so Harrison will be sent away. Dexter will just find Rita, and that will be it. Distraught by Rita's murder, Dexter calls the police and heads outside, and that would be the end of season 5.
Okay. Um, so for season 5, I'd like to change who Lumen is. I'd make her tragedy, of her being a part of a sect, being attacked by those sex trafficking, like, rapists or whatever. I'd make that a huge part of her character. But I'd like to make season 5 and season 6 be about Dexter discovering his religion, not really discovering his religion, but using religion as a coping mechanism for his grief, while also seeing the flaws with religion. How he, with like most of what I'm thinking about this show, exploring the positives and the negatives of certain situations, the impacts of certain ideologies or certain um, certain events that happen in people's lives. And I really thought that Lumen, even though obviously she was just an obvious replacement for Rita, they were trying to obviously like go for that a little bit. I feel like her character, what they do with her in the show, how long she's in it, and then obviously she just instantly goes away. I feel like that needs more emotional involvement. I need more of a payoff with that. And yeah, that's really it. I feel like I would sort of more or less have, they meet at this church or whatever, and they start to really you hit it off, but then obviously Dexter sort of goes into her past, and she finds out who he really is over a certain incident, and this leads to them, killing the, what was the name of the guy?
Jordan Chase.
Yeah, Jordan Chase. Yeah, it leads to that whole how that whole thing is resolved. I forget how that's resolved, to be honest with you. It's been a long time since I've seen the show, but um, that's I'm I'm sorry, I am not as prepared as I thought I was. Um,
That's all right.
but yeah, and I feel like it's obviously it's Dexter moving on, but I feel like how they handle him moving on from Rita's death in season 5, and then him just going into religion. I feel like his religion should just be explored through the next 2 seasons, and I feel like it should be a huge impact to his life. And I mean, it doesn't have to mean that he's actually religious or not. He could just be going into the idea of maybe understanding the morality of what he's doing, but also wondering if the people that died, if these people are collateral damage, or if there's a purpose to it. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that'd be an interesting thing. Exploring the deaths of Harry, the deaths of Brian, and the deaths of Rita, and obviously, um, there's certain aspects to what happened to these characters that are revealed throughout the show. But I feel like, obviously him killing Brian, him inadvertently, getting Rita involved and Rita getting killed, and then obviously Harry, the dark past of Harry, which I haven't really gotten into how I would change that. I feel like exploring that early on in the show would be more impactful. But uh, yeah, exploring his morality while also obviously seeing things from a different perspective. And I feel like Brother Sam would be a good character to also introduce into the season early on, having his presence, because I feel like season 6, he's probably the best part of that about that season. He really is a really interesting character. I just wish they would have done more with him in that, in the original show. But yeah, that's really all I have to say about season 5. I think the whole religious arc that he has in season 6. I feel like they should anchor that and introduce that early on into the show. Like a season early, have that lament, and then have it, have it build to the season 6.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's really it that I got for season 5.
All right. Kind of funny you brought some of that stuff up because if I remember correctly, when I wrote this, that was the direction that I was heading for season 6. I wanted to swap, basically, seasons 6 and 7. I really liked some of the religious aspects, like you said, basically Brother Sam, and that's it, of season
Mhm.
7. Um, or, well, I guess it would be season 6 in the actual show,
Yeah,
wouldn't it?
yeah,
Whatever. You know what I mean?
yeah. I
Um,
get it, Sam.
so, yeah, that's basically what I'm doing. The show is technically caught up with the rewrite at this point, or the whatever. You know, I keep fucking this up, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I agree, Sam.
So Rita's death is a ground-shattering change for the characters. Dexter is distraught and kind of reluctantly accepts that, he actually did love her. It wasn't something that he was faking. And he, for the first time, not only realizes, hey, so I have emotions, but he also realizes, hey, I wasn't like entirely sure I was capable of this. So he becomes the primary suspect because of the phone call, amongst everything else. But he's very quickly cleared of everything. That said, his way of handling Rita's murder leads Quinn to believe that he may be involved. Everything with Deb and Quinn remains the same. The two of them still get together. Quinn still hires Stan Liddy to investigate Dexter. Dexter still kills Liddy. Dexter still lies on the blood report and saves Quinn from being imprisoned. And Miami Metro concludes that Trinity did kill Rita. Early on, Dexter sends Astor and Cody to live with their grandparents with the hopes that he can sort things out himself, because he's still a disaster from what's happened to Rita. It's having kind of, I guess you could say, almost irreparable damage to him as a person. He's not entirely sure how to cope with it. He does hope at some point that he can bring them back, but Astor is still upset and blames him for not being there to protect her mother. With Nikki having taken the job at Miami Metro with her father, Dexter now hires Jamie Batista as Harrison's new babysitter, and basically does sort of what was done in the show, which is with the random babysitter that I cannot remember the name of. Dexter repeatedly was just like, "Hi, I need you to watch Harrison for like the next 68 hours while I go do something." So I'm gonna have that sort of happen, but probably not to the same extent as the show, where it's just for an entire day. I will just not see my son and come home. The changes come in for the most part on Dexter's side of the story. He feels as though his world is crumbling and he's not entirely sure how to handle it. Vogel is dead, so he can't talk to her. Deb is still in the dark about everything he does, so he can't open that can of worms. And so he starts attending church. Here he meets Brother Sam, a former convict who he believes is still committing crimes. Dexter vets Sam and then finds that he's a changed man, making Dexter wonder if maybe religion could actually work for him too. Sam gets Dexter to open up about some of his darker sides of his past and Rita's murder, allowing him to kind of accept his responsibility for her death. Instead of jumping into Lumen's story, instead I'd like to go with Travis Marshall being the killer this season. Yes, again, I know what I just said. Hear me out. Professor Geller won't be a figment of his imagination, and that's because there is no Professor Geller, because that is a fucking stupid twist. So Travis instead will be the leader of a small cult here in Miami, and he will carry out religious killings. Dexter initially is more than happy to do things by the book since it lets him focus on getting himself into a better spot mentally, and allowing him to basically mourn Rita. That is until Brother Sam becomes one of Travis's victims, and Dexter then decides to take matters into his own hands as Miami Metro closes in on Travis. By falsifying evidence and changing old reports, Dexter sends his colleagues on a wild goose chase to find Travis, while he follows up on the real leads. After seeing the changes in the report and piecing together what she believes is the truth, that Dexter is coping with Rita's murder and Sam's murder by killing Travis, Deb sets out to stop Dexter before he can do anything that would ruin his life or career. Dexter gets Travis into the church and kills him, with Deb arriving just in time to see Dexter fully commit to the kill itself. Dexter and Deb talk until the former convinces the latter to help him cover up the murder by setting the church on fire. As far as side plots, Masuka and Nikki have a small little story that plays out where the two of them bond over their time at work, And at the same time, Nikki uses Rita's death as a means to kind of get closer with her father, since both of them are kind of at the realization that death is inevitable. And let's be real here, two of them haven't exactly been prominent figures in each other's lives, so that kind of hits them a little bit harder than it would anyone else, I guess. In terms of side plots, Batista and LaGuardia officially become a couple and decide rather quickly to get married because of the pressure from Captain Matthews. That their relationship means one of them will have to be reassigned, as well as having Rita's death thrown at them at the same time. Uh, Dexter will not be their witness because I think that's actually incredibly insensitive to have him continue to fill that role in this. So instead, I'm going to have it happen at a small ceremony in Brother Sam's church, probably near the end of the season, something like that. In her off time, LaGuardia looks into Captain Matthews after hearing that he's hoping to be promoted to deputy chief, and this will prompt her to find the evidence of him using prostitutes that she can use as blackmail. Set up and pay off. It will pay off, I promise. The season will end with Miami Metro investigating the fire at the church, during which Deb will find the blood slide that Dexter took and quietly pocket it while the others examine the scene and come to the conclusion that Deb and Dexter hoped for, that Travis Marshall killed himself. And that's all I've got.
Um, so I'm gonna keep in season 6. I'm gonna do a similar thing that what you're doing. I'm gonna make Travis the main killer, and the whole twist is really stupid of of Geller being in his head and shit like that. That definitely is really bad, and I'm glad that you're also removing that whole part from the rewrite. But I kind of thought Geller should at least be, if I'm going to go with Dexter, sort of dictating how he feels with the words of Brother Sam and the words of God. Obviously he's not that, naive of a person, so he's not going to fully succumb to just simple rhetoric, but he finds himself following uh you know following certain steps, following certain pieces of advice that he hears from the people of the church and Brother Sam, that helps him with certain kills per se, or certain things where he's like, should I, can I better myself? Can I, after all the blame I'm putting onto myself for Rita's death and exploring the tragedy of his life, you know, should he use this religious um this religious insight that he's having, should he use it as a sign to get better, or to, he's still, kind of fuzzy about that. But I'd make the killers Travis, but I would make Geller still a living person. But all he really does is just write online scripture that is sort of seen as some sort of demonic version of the Bible, where it's not necessarily meant to talk about everything being good. It's sort of trying to convince really fucked up people to commit terrible things. Now, obviously, Travis is a very broken person who does do these things, and he's in communication with Geller, but obviously Geller is just some random guy that we don't really know him. We don't really see him, but Travis is more inspired by this idea of that these scriptures are telling him, like, you'll find salvation when you do these, when he does these terrible things, and he reads into these because people in real life have done this, so they'll read into something that's not that deep, and they'll try to commit terrible acts. So I thought you could kind of introduce that in some ways. And I feel like Dexter seeing a parallel with himself, seeing, not only is Travis reading into, this scripture, reading into the words of Geller, and he's reading into the words of other people, and he's not making decisions for himself, while also Travis is not trying to better himself. He thinks he is, but he's really, obviously, he's hurting others in the process. And Dexter kind of sees a little bit of a parallel with himself. But then I'm gonna go with the same ending that of season 6, where Deb finds Dexter, and she sees everything, and she knows who he is now, and Dexter kills Travis. And I don't want Travis to be this broken individual, like he was in the sixth season. I want to make him this broken individual where he's very confident in himself, but he's also still a very fucked up guy. He's still, he still has a tragic past to him, but obviously there's no good about him that you can really explore. But I kind of wanted to explore maybe why he's doing this rather than just, oh, he's just an evil guy, you know? And I feel like the whole Galler twist of the guy in his head telling him what to do was just kind of like there's nothing really there
Mm-hmm.
that makes me feel sympathy for him, but at the same time, it doesn't make me care anymore about, oh, he's so evil. It's like I just seeing this instant change in character in the original season just was so unbelievable. And so I feel like make it consistent, make him a really fucked up dude that is gone down this really terrible like rabbit hole of the internet or whatever, and it inspires him to do all this terrible shit. And obviously, I just really wanted to explore Dexter. Seeing the parallel between himself and Travis. I'll also seeing the differences too. And he kills him, and then his identity is sort of revealed to his sister, and that makes him realize that maybe he does have to get better, but he also has to make these smart decisions. He can't just cloudy himself with certain ideas. And I'm not trying to make a whole message about how like, religion is bad or whatever. I'm just trying to say that like perhaps he can use the words of these scriptures while also obviously making his own decisions and thinking things out. Being true to himself while also realizing that he could do better, that and that the people around him do get hurt by this, that he doesn't, he thinks he's doing this to help himself, but he's actually hurting others in the process. And I feel like that's a concept that they try to explore throughout the show, but they don't really do it as much as they should have. But yeah, that's really my season 6.
All right. So the rewrite of season 7, I'm just going to jump right into it. The beginning that I have is Matthews and LaGuardia both being promoted at that ceremony following Travis Marshall's case. LaGuardia is now captain, Matthews is deputy chief, and things seem kind of cordial between the two until obviously the public cameras are off. Basically, that intro scene where we get the two of them talking and everything seems fine and cordial, and then as soon as the cameras are off them, they're both like, yeah, fuck you. Um, that's all staying the same. After last season, LaGuardia has blackmailed Matthews into promoting her, but in exchange, Matthews gets to pick the next lieutenant, and he wants it to be Deborah, much to LaGuardia's chagrin. The political state of affairs at Miami Metro will be relatively important to these last 2 seasons before the spinoff, so bear with me. Deb becomes lieutenant, and this puts her in an odd position. She can't help but feel like it was handed to her by a close friend of her father's, while at the same time she recognizes that that same friend used her promotion as a jab at both LaGuardia and Batista for the trouble they've caused him in the past. Deb also has to juggle the feud between LaGuardia and Matthews, while also trying to sort of keep her relationship with Batista afloat. At the same time, LaGuardia is doing everything that she can to make Deb look bad, and at the same time, on top of all of that, she has now just found out that Deb killed Travis Marshall. Or not Deb, Dexter has killed Travis Marshall. And because of the blood slide, it is entirely possible that he is truly the Bay Harbor Butcher. Thanks to Dexter's monologue and conversations across Miami Metro, Travis Marshall's murder has been successfully covered up. The knife Dexter used was replaced with a ceremonial sword to cover up the fact that someone else killed him, and the church was set on fire, destroying most evidence of anything else. In between work and his home life, Dexter seems to have found a new target, Boyd Fowler. So basically, if you can't tell, now that I'm done with season 6, I am basically recycling what would have been the plot of season 5 in the original show. He eventually kills Boyd, discovers the sex dungeon Boyd and the other guys from the, I guess, Barrel Girls gang, if we're going with the quote-unquote canon name for them. The dungeon that they kept, and instead of finding Lumen, he will find Hannah. And I guess I should note this now. Instead of using Lumen and Hannah as 2 separate characters because of the amount of time that I have left in the show, I think it makes a hell of a lot more sense to blend the 2 of them. So I ended up making it Hannah because I liked Hannah's actress more than Lumen. That's just my personal taste, but really it doesn't matter, I guess. Either way, Dexter vows to help her get revenge on the men who raped her. So, around the same time, Dexter comes home to find that Deb has searched his apartment. She's found his kill tools and the blood slides, and then asks him then and there if he's a serial killer. So, Dexter now has to tell her the truth, and that changes their relationship forever going forward. After their talk, Dexter stops collecting blood slides, and additionally, Deb insists on being involved in preventing Dexter from killing altogether, which doesn't go over incredibly well considering the promise that he made to Hannah to help her kill the people that assaulted her. Um, Dexter progressively slips out of Deb's grasp time and time again to go see Hannah, and Deb eventually backs off when Dexter explains to her what he's doing. With Hannah's help, Dexter kills Dan Mendel, Cole Harmon, Alex Tilden, and then finally helps Hannah get to Jordan Chase and allows her to kill him herself. The plot line is basically the same, save for Deb's interference, the character swap for Chase's motivation, because I guess that's another thing we talked about that. I don't really understand the point of making Chase basically a cuck. So, Chase is just another guy that abused her. It fits a hell of a lot easier, and it makes a hell of a lot more sense that way. And the ending of the season is going to be a little bit different, I believe. Ultimately, Hannah and Dexter will enter a relationship around the end of the season, and instead of having her leave like Lumen did, I would have her stick around to become a more permanent factor in his life, like Hannah did in the real show. Um, Dexter does what he can to keep Deb from freaking out since she knows his secret, going so far as to tell her everything that he knows, not only about his past, but about Harry, about Vogel, about Harry's apparent suicide, everything that he has figured out further context for that Deb might not be aware of throughout every season prior to this point. He also uses Deb's position to cover for him and Hannah as needed, but neither him nor Deb like having to do it. As far as side plots, the Barrel Girl gang murders are investigated by Miami Metro, and LaGuardia uses her position as captain to force Deb into situations that reflect incredibly poorly on her, offers her bad advice, and asks Deb to cover up Matthews' involvement with a prostitute before using that to blackmail Matthews and then get him removed as deputy chief altogether. In doing so, she decides at the end of the season to reopen the Bay Harbor Butcher case unofficially. Uh, Actually, no, I guess at that point it would be officially. And then simultaneously, LaGuardia has been focused on her career, so her relationship with Batista has suffered, and the two of them eventually decide to divorce. And then Quinn proposes to Deb around the same time that she gets promoted and has everything else that I've listed off happening in her life at the time. So she says no because she isn't sure what she wants, and then they break up shortly after that. That is what I have for season 7.
Okay. Um, so my ideas for season seven, obviously we're kind of going into the similar route where, Dexter or Deb sees Dexter kill Marshall. In mine, it's like, this is the huge reveal that that Dexter is a killer, and you start to see Deb wonder, seeing that Dexter is the Bay Harbor Butcher or could be. And I'd have their relationship in the original season. I liked that quite a bit. I liked their back and forth. I liked Deb sort of being like the Rita that actually knows what's going on, where like she's constantly having Dexter second guess himself, constantly having Dexter to change his plans, change everything he's doing. And I'd continue LaGuardia being the big. I guess she's like the big bad of this season anyway. But like have her be this. She starts to see. She starts to see, an interest in Dexter's involvement. That's what I wanted to do in season six. Have his involvement in Rita, or in the Bay Harbor Butcher stuff, start to see that. But you also, I wanted to explore, LaGuardia, she starts to have this tension between her and Deb, start having a tension between her and Dexter, where she knows something's up. She knows that there's something wrong, but she can't really go into it yet. Now, in my story, the Bay Harbor Butcher thing still hasn't been resolved. I probably could fix that by just, putting the whole thing on Dokes again. But I'm thinking having it still be open could remain some sort of tension, you know. But so Deb starts to wonder if she should actually start if she should you know reveal Dexter as the Bay Harbor Butcher, if if she starts to have this question of morality that Dexter had early on in this series, where Dexter is seeing the pros of Brian being in his life, but also obviously seeing the effects he's having on other people. He knows it's going to be eating at him basically, and I feel like I want to have the same thing for Deb, where she loves Dexter. She loves Dexter a lot, as a brother, but she wants to care for him, but at the same time she's worried about what he's becoming and if he is truly dangerous. And I kind of want the at the end of the show, LaGuerta is able to find some sort of evidence against Dexter, and that's sort of how this season will end. Is that LaGuerta finds some big evidence on Dexter, and I also want to say that the big bad of this season, I want to get rid of Isaac Serco, and introduced the brain surgeon early on, but I want him to carry on into season 8. So I want Dexter to, he does like those kill of the week things where he just goes and finds these people, but these people have some sort of connection to who the brain surgeon is. This brain surgeon is this elusive, like Zodiac killer type of guy who's leaving these cryptic letters, these cryptic things that lead Dexter not only to his past, but also maybe not inadvertent, like not like purposely, but I just want the brain surgeon to be this like elaborate guy who, with each person that Dexter finds and kills, he finds this strange connection, and it brings him to the end of the season where the brain surgeon knows who Dexter is. The brain surgeon, and at the end is sort of like how Brian was leaving all those clues in season 1. One sec, sorry. I gotta pause 1 sec.
All right. I guess while you're doing that, I will start reading out what I've got for season 8. For the side plots in the rewrite, Batista will consider retirement, and by the end of the season, he will eventually leave Miami Metro to open a restaurant with Jamie and close the book on his work as a cop. Uh, Nikki will find a different job and decide to leave Miami, getting a small little send off with Masuka before the finale. And finally, as we sort of got in season 8, that was kind of botched, Deb and Quinn will reconcile and get back together. And it looks like you're back, so I will get into the main plot stuff for season 8 when you're done with season 7.
1 sec. So going on or finishing up what I was going to say. So, Deb starts to wonder if she should start this case, and you see this brain surgeon guy coming up, and he leaves these clues, leading Dexter, to obviously wonder what he's doing is right, and I don't know. He's just really being eat. But both Dexter and Deb are being eaten alive by their own thoughts. Deb is being eaten alive by the idea of allowing Dexter to continue his like his activities. While also Dexter is continuing to do his activities, and he's seeing this guy looking at him, and it's sort of taunting him. It's looming in the back of his head. Like, is this guy going to hurt me? Is he going to hurt my son? Is he going to hurt my family? Is he going to hurt Deb? And that's what leads us into the season finale of season 7, where um I'm not going to do the same thing that they did, where we kill off LaGuerta. I'm going to let LaGuerta still continue. She still finds, I want her to find some sort of evidence against Dexter that leads us to a season finale where not only do we have this incoming threat from the brain surgeon, but we also have this threat from LaGuerta. And that's how I'll do that.
All right. So, as far as the main plot of season 8, I have Dexter kind of under the impression that things are calming down. Deb is kind of seeing what he does as a necessary evil. Now that Jordan Chase and the other guys that raped her are dead, Hannah is kind of at a point where she can sort of heal and move on. So, her relationship with Dexter is blossoming, and Deb again, her relationship with Dexter seems to be in a really good spot. So Dexter spends a lot of the first half of the season looking towards the future with Hannah and Harrison, and he finally is able to bring Aster and Cody home. Things have calmed down. He's finally able to kind of get them to come back home. They're sort of a semi-functional, dysfunctional family. He ends up proposing to Hannah, and the two of them quickly get married in a small little ceremony. Not all that unlike what happened with Batista and LaGuerta. But eventually, the two kids, Aster, not entirely thrilled that Dexter is going to remarry, but eventually, throughout the season, she will grow to kind of accept Hannah and accept that she means a lot to Dexter. So that was about where I wanted to leave that for now. A lot of this season, I wanted to kind of throw the LaGuerta Bay Harbor Butcher investigation right into the spotlight. So LaGuerta will continue to look into the Bay Harbor Butcher case, picking up where Dokes and Quinn left off in season 3. She hopes to prove Dokes' innocence by following his hunch that Dexter is the Butcher. Within the last few episodes, within the first few episodes, she exhausts several different leads, including finding the Bay Harbor Butcher's M99 dealer and cross-referencing the list of people who owned boats in the area in the last several years. Pressed for options, LaGuerta talks to Matthews and agrees to get him his old job back if he helps her with the investigation. So Matthews and LaGuerta sit down with Dokes and walk through any leads and basically look through what Dokes and Quinn came up with several years before. Eventually, for whatever reason it may be, Matthews pieces together that Santos Jimenez was one of the 3 people that murdered Dexter's mother, and that is the exact person that Dokes was framed for murdering. So LaGuerta comes up with an idea. If Dexter truly is the Butcher, there is still one person that he has not killed, that is still alive, that killed his mother. And so, as you and I talked about, it was one of the few points of praise of season 7 I had at the time. LaGuerta will release Hector Estrada is the name. That was why I was struggling. She will release Hector Estrada and basically use him as bait to set up Dexter and try to capture him. With that in mind, LaGuerta is extremely confident that Dexter not only is the Bay Harbor Butcher, but she is also convinced that Dokes will be cleared if they can get this to work. But Matthews reminds her that not only do they need to catch Dexter, but they need evidence. Through Deb's position as lieutenant, Dexter catches wind of LaGuerta's investigation late in the season and finds a way to point her and Matthews towards a boathouse that Dokes supposedly owned, staging it so that it appears that he has been housing the boat, kill tools, and plastic wrap that he would need to carry out the Bay Harbor Butcher murders. After checking the site, Matthews is convinced Dokes is still their guy, but LaGuerta insists that the evidence was planted in order to basically divert them away from the truth. She shrugs it off, says she has other ways to get Dexter, and that is when she commits fully to releasing Hector Estrada, knowing that Dexter will go after him the same way that he did with Jimenez. Her plan almost works, since Dexter nearly kills Estrada, but he realizes what she's doing and flees. LaGuerta knows Dexter is onto her, but she knows she's now more determined than ever to stop him. LaGuerta confronts Deb one more time, piecing together some issues with their story about Travis Marshall, including the timing of their arrival at the scene, gas being used as an accelerant, and Marshall's supposed suicide. She digs up some old cases tying missing people to cases that they've worked on, and wonders whether or not Deb knows what happened to any of them. Dexter hatches a plan to kill Estrada and LaGuerta, seeing no other way out now that she's onto him. He makes all the necessary arrangements, talks to Hannah about what to do if he gets caught or killed, and takes off. Dexter nabs Estrada and starts staging the scene, but LaGuerta gets the jump on Dexter and forces his hand. Using Estrada's gun, LaGuerta is killed by Dexter, but in doing so, Dexter has left several pieces of evidence that he needs to clean up, but he does not have enough time, as Matthews is on the scene and has him arrested and brought into custody for both murders. In the end, Dexter is charged with both murders, his kill tools are eventually found, and he is arrested. Batista remarks that by this time tomorrow, the world will know the truth about who Dexter really is, And as such, Deb resigns her post, feeling guilty about LaGuardia's murder by association and being unable to stop Dexter from going through with it. The season ends with a year time skip. Deb and Quinn are engaged, but Deb has taken up an insignificant job elsewhere, while Quinn has been promoted to lieutenant. Hannah has adopted Harrison, Astor, and Cody. Dokes has returned to Miami Metro as sergeant following his release and mourns LaGuardia's death. And Dexter sits in a cell, now on death row, awaiting his eventual execution. And that is the ending that I have for season 8.
I like that. It's really good. Um, yeah, my season 8 is not it's not that good, but I will say that I tried my best with my whole rewrite. I tried to keep the themes true of each season. Well, obviously, kind of going into the flaws of each season and talking about them and changing them. So, Dexter starts to see the connection between the clues that the brain surgeon is leaving behind to his own personal life. The case that against Dexter becomes more and more intense as they search through his belongings and find the blood slides, and his case is now wide open. Dexter finds the brain surgeon, though, through an intricate cat and mouse chase that leaves Dexter to explore sites like his childhood home. And he starts to realize the connection between the brain surgeon and himself. He finds Oliver Saxon and has him on his kill table. He keeps interrogating him. He keeps asking him, "Why are you doing this? Why are you leaving me all these notes?" And he just says, um, "What's the therapist's? Is it Mogul? Is that her name?"
Vogel?
Vogel. Yes, Vogel. That's his mom, right? Or no?
That's Saxon's mom, yes.
Okay. All right. So he says Vogel, and Dexter remembers that he found a book in one of the, during this cat and mouse chase. He found a book by Vogel, and he uh, actually no, fuck it. I'm gonna scrap that. Sorry. But
That's okay.
he basically says Vogel, and he kills Oliver Saxon on his kill table, obviously. But LaGuardia sees the whole thing, and Dexter doesn't know this. This is all in secret, and but this word Vogel haunts him for the rest for this almost first part of the season. But LaGuardia is obviously and she saw him kill Saxon, so this is an eyewitness report here. So, LaGuardia, she's so adamant that he is, the Bay Harbor Butcher. And he killed Oliver Saxon. Oliver Saxon is missing. He's not reported dead, even though obviously she reported. Well, she didn't really know who he was, but still, like she saw him kill a guy. And so I guess there's no real connection between Saxon and Dexter, but whatever. But she thinks that Dexter is a killer and he is the Bay Harbor Butcher. And obviously, there's enough evidence, with the blood sides, that he has these huge connections. But anyway, so but Dexter does more and more investigation after he gets rid of the body. He goes and he tries to find who this Vogel is, and he goes back to these different sites that the brain surgeon brought him to, and he finds this book. I'll go back to the whole book thing by Vogel, and Vogel has passed away. She's dead. She's not. She has an impact on this part of the story, but she doesn't character assassinate Harry like they did in the original show. So, but she talks about an instance where she did talk with Harry, and she goes, and obviously you can't really describe patient. There's that whole clause where you can't talk about a patient's life. You can't. There's a I forget what it's specifically called, but it's like
Patient client privilege, basically, right?
yeah, basically, yeah. That's what I'm going into. So she goes and she talks about these vague things, and then she talks about the case of Dexter, but obviously does she leaves out certain details of names and people, and and Dexter just knows that this is about him, but obviously Vogel could be anybody. Vogel could be, but there's no this is just eating at Dexter. But then obviously LaGuardia saw Dexter kill him and whatever. And this might be a little bit more messier than than the season before, the actual season, but whatever. But Dexter's being put like kind of how you did it, where he's getting convicted for this, and I do like your idea of the 1 year later. And I like the idea of Dexter basically telling Hannah, like, oh yeah, prepare for this, which I didn't really talk about it. I didn't really have Hannah in my in this version of the show, but I'll say have Deb take care of um Harrison, I guess. But yeah, sorry, I'm a mess right now. Uh,
You're all
but
good, man. You're all good.
But basically, I just have the ending sort of be the same way, where you're leaving Dexter in a very vulnerable spot. He's being convicted of all of these crimes, and yeah, I'll just leave it at that, I guess. That's really my big idea there.
Okay. So now we're at the fun one. We're at New Blood.
Hey,
Um, I will admit this one wasn't as hard for me because I knew exactly the ending I wanted to go with before I had even rewritten the first season. Um, so I guess to start us off, it's an insignificant little note. But if I had my way, New Blood would probably go by a different name. But for the sake of the rewrite, there's no point in me coming up with one. So we'll just stick with New Blood. The season would follow everyone's lives 10 years after Dexter's arrest. Hannah, Harrison, Astor, and Cody are living in relative isolation since they've been ostracized for being the wife and children or stepchildren of a serial killer. Harrison hasn't seen his father in years. Actually, none of the kids have. I don't even believe in this version that I'm doing that Hannah has even seen him. She would probably have just communicated with him through letters, and that's it. Now a bit older, Harrison decides to visit Dexter and get his side of the story, admitting that between Hannah, Deb, his siblings, and the news, he's heard quite a bit, but only his father can confirm what's real and what isn't. Dexter, who has exhausted 4 different appeals by this point, before seemingly giving up, I should say, meets with his son and tries to reconnect with him. He doesn't make much progress initially, but eventually Harrison comes around to the idea of, well, getting to know his father. Dexter files one last appeal, hoping to overturn his sentence and have a relationship with his son outside of prison. The main plot follows Dexter and Harrison as the former goes back to court, re-examining everything that Dexter has done and gone through, coming to peace with the inevitable end of his life. Harrison gets some time to know his father, learn about Rita, and learn about what Dexter truly did. At the same time, Miami Metro Homicide consults Dexter regarding a series of murders, hoping he can provide some insight on the case. The murderer they would be hunting would be Kurt Caldwell, the runaway killer, who would be killing young women who run away from home, much like they did in New Blood. Through their time working together on the case, Dokes and Dexter get some time to talk, allowing the two to sort of come to an understanding with one another about the events of the first 8 seasons of the show. Dexter is also grappling with the guilt of having killed an innocent person in direct violation of his father's code, simply to protect himself, a decision that weighs heavily on the other characters too. Dexter reconnects with Deb in the midst of his assistance in the runaway killer case and his appeal, having Quinn arrange it for him as a favor for helping Miami Metro. Dexter fills Deb in on everything with his appeal and Harrison coming to visit him, prompting Deb to reluctantly remark that Dexter's appeal will likely never work in his favor, and suggests that maybe it's time he take accountability for everything he's done. Dexter remarks that Deb never faced any repercussions for her decision to help him, to which she says that he's right, but she has paid the price for it every day since he was arrested. She may not have faced legal repercussions for her actions, but she has paid for it in her own ways. She quit her job, she's lost contact with most of her former friends and coworkers. Her relationship with Quinn is forever changed because of Dexter's arrest, and she has limited contact with Hannah and her nieces and nephews. Deb wraps up their conversation by reminding him that Hannah, Harrison, Astor, and Cody have all paid the price for knowing Dexter and being connected to him as well. In the end, Kurt is arrested by Miami Metro, and Dexter's appeal attempt ends with him following Deb's advice and taking accountability for everything that he has done by admitting to having killed hundreds of people, most of whom were never found, and essentially condemns himself to death while simultaneously sending a message to Harrison about responsibility and also covering up Hannah's involvement in killing her rapists. He walks out to his execution being surrounded, quote unquote, by apparitions of his victims and being strapped into a chair while his former friends and family members watch as he is killed by lethal injection.
Yeah, that's great. I really like that a lot. I might steal some of the things that you said there
Go for it.
because I really like that. So I'm gonna do the same thing. So
That's
you know,
always good to hear.
so Dexter is, in this ending, Dexter has a similar thing where this is many years later, he's still trying to appeal his convictions. Actually, some of these things that like even the very ending of what you're saying is the exact ending that I wanted to have for the show, which obviously the original writers also sort of had a similar idea too. But um so basically he kind of does the same thing that what happens with your season, except um I'd more or less I would explore the effects that Dexter's absence has on Harrison and really go into that, go into and I would I do like how he talks about like in your season how you're talking about exploring who Rita was, giving Harrison this insight that he never had, this lack of time that he had with his father. And, he's told throughout his whole life that his father is this terrible person, and Dexter is just trying to come to terms with this throughout the whole season. And yeah, I would just make it this a really emotional season about um Deb has had to step up as a person, but obviously she's still coping with the major loss of obviously Dexter isn't dead, but his loss of being there, his absence does kind of take a toll on her. As for bringing anything other than Harrison into, um, from New Blood, um, shit, I don't know. Because I kind of want Deb to take care of Harrison, and she's kind of been raising him, but at the same time she still is sort of this broken person where she isn't the Deb she used to be. She's not this lighthearted person. This Dexter's absence really has had this huge toll on her. And I want the rest of the season to be Harrison having to choose between taking advice from his father, who's obviously a very flawed person, or his aunt, who, she's the right up from the law, but they're both very, mentally not there. And I basically just wanted this to be a way for us to explore Harrison's character because I feel like they don't really do that in New Blood. Like they act like New Blood is about Dexter's and Harrison's connection and this and that and them learning to be father and son, but it's really kind of a thrown on the back burner like most of the things. But I do think if I had to introduce Kurt Caldwell, which I think he's probably one of my favorite killers, even though he's in the worst season of the show. Um, but I feel like
I'm
maybe
gonna
if you
gonna second that. Don't mean to cut you off.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Fucking terrible season. Uh,
Oh well,
but
that,
also
but also Kurt being one of the better ones.
Oh
Sorry.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. But I feel like if Dexter can maybe be to Deb in this season like in Silence of the Lambs with fuck what's his name? Hannibal Lecter and Jodie Foster, how or Clarice, where she's obviously she's getting this advice from a guy who he's killed people before this movie, but also he kills people during the in the movie in Silence of the Lambs. I kind of feel like that'd be kind of cool. It's like if Dexter obviously he's trying to uh, you know he's trying to sort of like what you're saying where he's trying to succumb to the eventual reality of his death, but also he's trying to help people, so he's helping Deb figure out who this Kurt Caldwell is, what he's doing, and perhaps seeing the effects that maybe Kurt Caldwell is having on the individuals around him, just from the word of mouth. And he's sort of this serial killer detective, even though he's behind bars. This is allowing Deb to sort of rekindle her relationship with her brother, while also allowing Dexter to, unfortunately, understand that his demise is coming soon. And then obviously, rekindling building a relationship between Harrison and Dexter, and also realizing how important Deb is in his life too. And I really just wanted the ending of the show to be the same that you said. Dexter realizes that this is the only way out, is to you know just realize his fate, and he gets put in the lethal injection, and he sees all these apparitions, like you said, like almost, dude, same exact ending too, where he's getting put in the lethal injection, and he just sees the faces of all the different people that he killed alongside his family. And I feel like if you had them right near each other, they're all the same face, like some, and it's one of those things where it's like this sort of mocking, but at the same time, it's sort of this emotional ending where it's Dexter realizing that he has to set himself aside and realize the impact of what he's done, but also realize that he did do something good at the end of the show. That in New Blood, he did rekindle his relationship. He did put Harrison on the right path, and he also helped Deb, you know, realize that she can still be a great detective. And yeah, and then at the end he dies. But I feel like this allows Dexter to, he leaves, but not how they leave him in in New Blood, where all this fucked up shit happens and he just dies, and
Yep.
he leaves Harrison alone. It's like in this version, he'd leave Harrison with with people that would care for him, and he's not as mentally fucked up as he was in the original show. So yeah, but that's how I do New Blood.
All right. Um, I think that's where we'll call it for now. If you watched all the way through, thank you for watching. Ian, thank you for
Of course, man.
doing all of this. This is a lot.
I enjoyed
It
this.
was, I think it was like 8.5 hours of coverage at least. So again,
Nice.
I appreciate it. It means a lot.
Yeah, no problem,
Um,
man.
we'll see you next time when we cover a TV show at obscene length and then fix it. Until then, goodbye.
What TV show is that?
I'm not sure. We'll see.
Oh, okay. All right. Hopefully we won't have to do a lot with The Last of Us, but yeah,
Yeah, that's gonna be. God, I'm gonna
I
have
mean,
to talk to you about that after we end here. But
okay, of
all right, thank you again for watching. Thank you, Ian, for your time, and
course.
we'll see you next time.